the trial of the King versus Colin Campbell Ross in 1922 marked the first time scientific comparisons of hair were used to obtain a conviction in an Australasian court. The case is widely regarded as the foundation case for the development of forensic medicine in Australia and New Zealand. The conviction achieved in this notorious murder trial gave an impetus to the subsequent presentation of scientific evidence and conferred on it an extraordinary legitimacy and credibility. The naked body of 12-year-old schoolgirl Alma Turchke was found by a bottle gatherer in an offshoot of Gun Alley, a dead-end lane off Melbourne's Little Collins Street, in the early morning of New Year's Eve 1921. She had been raped and strangled. The accused was Colin Campbell Ross, the keeper of a nearby wine saloon. He was convicted of the murder and hanged at the Old Melbourne Jail in April 1922. He strenuously protested his innocence from beginning to end. The prosecution claimed that hair taken from the head of the victim matched 22 hairs found on a blanket in Ross's possession. The government analyst of the day, Charles Price, a chemist, examined both sets of hairs microscopically and testified that the two sets were, in his opinion, derived from the scalp of one and the same person. Ross's defence was denied permission by the Crown to arrange for their own tests on the hair specimens. And here is a copy of the actual letter written by Colin Ross's solicitor, Henry Sonnenberg, one of the leading practitioners in law of the period in Melbourne. And it's dated 30th of January 1922, which is a couple of days after the inquest at which Colin Ross was committed to stand trial. It's addressed to Fred J. Piggott, who was the leading detective in the CIB of the time, and he was in charge of this case. And it just says, "Dear Sir, it's intended to have an independent test of the hair alleged to have been found by you and the government analyst on blankets taken from the home where the accused and his relations lived, as also of the hair obtained from the head of the dead girl, Alma. Will you kindly let me know when and where these exhibits can be inspected and tested?" And he concludes, "An early answer will oblige." He got one 2 days later. And the detective has passed Sonnenberg's note up the chain of command to the Crown solicitor. So the answer from the top, the second paragraph: "I have to state that it is of the first importance that such exhibits, when produced on the trial, should be in the same condition precisely as when the witness gave evidence respecting them in the court below. I cannot therefore agree to any tests being made at this stage." Perhaps the court, after they have been exhibited on the trial, would, on application, grant your request. In other words, after the trial, after the verdict and after the judgment, we might consider letting you have access. At the trial, Price acknowledged the blanket hairs and the hairs from the victim showed differences in colour and diameter, but said that microscopically they agreed, because there was a kind of coarseness about them. Beyond this, no specifics as to actual diameters or gradations of colour were given, nor were any photographs provided to the court to show the condition of the hairs microscopically. In 1922, it's doubtful that any of the all-male jury, comprising 2 tram conductors, a tanner, a plumber, a cigar maker, a wood merchant, a gas employee, a driver, a driller, a sugar worker, a traveller, and a clerk who was made foreman had ever looked through a microscope, or indeed would ever be likely to. One can only guess at their capacity to appreciate what was meant by results involving hair that agreed microscopically. "17 years ago, in July 1993, I was a student librarian and had to do a 3-week practical placement at a library of my choice, and I chose the Library of the National Gallery of Victoria. Signing in at 8 o'clock each morning, I walked through the corridors of glassware, ceramics, sculptures, toward the library. Since the public weren't admitted for another 2 hours, it was still too early for the exhibition rooms to be staffed. The place was deserted. In one large chamber was a maze-like array of panels with framed paintings and drawings hung on them, and some with gaps where pictures were yet to be hung. An exhibition was being readied here of Australian artist Charles Blackman's pictures. While in preparation, the area was closed to the public, but I had to pass through it every time I went in and out of the library. I can't remember exactly how many days it took to sink in, but gradually I became aware, excuse me, that there was a figure among the panels. Blackman had kept on repainting and redrawing this one figure, a schoolgirl in a pleated tunic and a mushroom-shaped hat. She darted in and out of darkened places, shadowy landscapes of menacing chimneys and narrow, empty streets. Sometimes she floated in the air past factories and clock towers at night, or sat reading at the witching hour in deserted schoolyards. Still, there were times when she would dance in sunlight or walk with a quiet poise past thorny vines and rose blooms.